Well, good afternoon, sales team optimization oracles. Welcome back again this month to www.salessystem.com.au. My name's Glenn Guilfoyle and I head up the sales team optimization specialist group called The Next Level. And we come to you each month in this form, both written and short video clip, with a poignant topic, something for you to take to your teams and discuss in terms of how to develop your sales team productivity to the next level. And in fact, I want to actually kick off with this month being the first part of a 3-part series. So please chime in and dial in over the coming months to be able to put the 3 parts together for a whole story, because I'm going to talk about making the emotional connection during the sales process and how that is more important than ever. Here we go. Part 1. In this climate of negative buyer and customer sentiment and all the talk of new recessions, making the emotional connection with the buyer is even more critical than ever for the aspirational sales professional. The concept of making the emotional connection in the buyer conversation is certainly not new, but there seems to be an irony at play here in the way that a large proportion of seller-buyer conversations play out. Since the GFC, more than 10 years ago now, most industries' products and services have become increasingly commoditized. And with this ugly trend comes the inevitable corollary of buyer price sensitivity. The sad reality is that a buyer is more likely nowadays to trade off some level of good wraparound service, since the core product or service differentiators are perceived to be diminishing to negligible in many industries, for a few shekels or zacks saved on price than what was the case pre-GFC. Yet, many sales professionals unwittingly fight fire by pouring kerosene on it. They try even harder to educate the buyer on their product service technicalities and features and benefits to win the sale, which insidiously drives the conversation away from making the emotional connection with the buyer. How to redress? Firstly, it is useful to think about the notion of making the emotional connection on a spectrum. Think about this scenario at the clear and obvious end of the emotional spectrum. Think about the retirement living village seller conversing with the retired couple making the move from the family home into the retirement living environment. It would be harder to think of a sales conversation scenario where the emotional drivers of the buying decision are more obvious than this one. At the alternative end of the same spectrum, the seller of generic medications into pharmacy, it would be hard to think of any pharmaceutical purchaser buying on behalf of any pharmacy establishment getting emotional about the generic choices between medicines that have the same active ingredients. Two ends of a spectrum in terms of the obvious versus non-obvious nature of the emotional connection to the buying process. But the good sales professional, regardless of the environment, and regardless of how obvious or otherwise the emotional evocation in the product or service being considered by the buyer, knows that there is always an emotional connection to be made with the buyer through the sales process. And that this capability makes the difference between a high performer and an also-ran. The key is in the clarity of thinking about the model or the framework that makes the sometimes not so obvious very obvious. When I come back next week, we're going to pull apart these two examples. The retirement living village scenario, where the emotional connection just screams out, versus the generic medication pharmacy sales scenario, where the emotional connection is very hidden, very hard to find. So, for now and this week, I hope this gives you a head start and a leg up to this 3-part series, and look forward to you dialing in again next month when we pick up the comparisons. Bye for now.